Hey everyone, it's Natalie Bencavanga, and welcome to Facts Over Fear. Now, Washington, D.C. voters consistently are saying that two issues are keeping them up at night. And these are really issues that I think are weighing on people's minds no matter what community they live in: public safety and affordability. But as housing prices remain out of reach for many families, as we're seeing utility bills climb, childcare costs consume large portions of household budgets, many residents in the DC area are asking just a basic question: can they still afford to live in the city that they love and call home? Kenyan McDuffie is running to be DC's next mayor on a platform centered on affordability, opportunity, and accountability. His proposals include building more housing, preserving affordable units, expanding home ownership opportunities, and investing in neighborhood resources, all while improving the city's safety. Today, we're digging into what affordability actually means in one of the nation's most expensive cities and whether local governments can actually do enough to help working families keep up with the rising cost of living. Joining me today is mayoral candidate Kenyan McDuffie. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation, Natalie.
Absolutely. So let's break it down for people before we get into your platform. For people that may not know, because what I try to do with this platform of Facts Over Fear is really get down to basics so that anyone, whether they've been following politics their whole life or maybe considering voting for the first time, can be a part of this conversation. What is the role of a mayor?
Sure. In Washington, D.C., it's actually rather unique
Mhm,
because we're not like any other city in America.
mhm.
We are a product of the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, which literally gives the power to Congress to make all laws for D.C. But in 1973, Congress gave Washington, D.C., after a lot of advocacy from D.C. residents, they gave us local home rule, which means that we have a mayor council form of government with one mayor and 13 elected members of the Council of the District of Columbia. And for Washington, D.C., it means a mayor essentially manages a $21 billion budget and functions not only as a big city mayor, but also has functions similar to counties and states. When we think about the funding that we get from the federal government, formula funding that other states get, we actually administer all those things. So we're actually doing things a lot differently than any other city in the United States. And you know, some of your folks will be surprised to know that we actually pay taxes like the citizens in every state in the union, but we don't have elected representation. We don't have two United States senators, nor do we have a voting member of the House of Representatives. But we operate a city like much other cities, except our rights aren't the same.
We're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit
Yeah.
later. Before we get into everything else, what made you want to run for mayor? Can you tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Sure. I love this city. I am a fourth generation Washingtonian. I grew up here, graduated from our public schools. I live in a home that my grandparents bought way back in 1952. And I'm raising two daughters with my wife, who's a fellow DC native. And I grew up during the tougher times in DC's history, during the 1980s and 1990s, where DC was a totally different place. We had more people leaving than we had moving to District of Columbia. We had more businesses shutting down, in fact, than we had opening. And so it was a really tough backdrop. In fact, the national news media referred to us as a murder capital of the United States when I was growing up in the District of Columbia. And so I struggled like a lot of other young folks when I graduated high school, didn't go to college right away. In fact, didn't apply to a single college. I just hoped to get a job to be able to take care of myself. But as I said, the economy was struggling. We were on the verge of having a control board put in place. And so I ended up not going to college. I got lucky, got an opportunity to carry mail to the United States Postal Service. So I literally delivered mail to homes across Washington, D.C., saved up money, went to college, and became the first man in my family to earn a college degree. And then I really got active in my community, became president of my neighborhood civic association, went on and worked for Congressman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who was resigning after decades of service in the District of Columbia. But I learned from her how to fight and deliver for Washington, D.C., how to fight to protect our home rule, how to advocate for statehood, and how to deliver resources without even having a vote. And so I went on to become a local prosecutor. and then worked in President Obama's United States Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division, where I traveled the country fighting to protect people's civil rights. And so I bring a unique background and unique experience through which I view the work of local government. And it's really, created an environment where I'm the best qualified candidate, both because of my upbringing in the city, experienced in the tough times, but also legislating as a council member for more than 13 years, doing some of the most transformational work that's ever been done when it comes to campaign finance reform and getting, businesses and other special interests outside of DC's elections. When it comes to criminal justice reform, I wrote our city's police body-worn camera legislation that serves as a model for other jurisdictions. And I did one of the first in the nation baby bonds bills in Washington, D.C. Some years ago. And so I've been a transformational legislator, and I'm running because I want to fight and deliver for all DC. We're experiencing some of the toughest times in our history right now with this president, with Republicans in Congress. They have set us back economically, and I want to make sure that we deliver a city that is safer, that's more affordable, and that's spreading opportunity to parts of the city that haven't seen it. We're going to deliver a government that works for everybody.
Let's talk a little bit about that idea of everybody. I've had the privilege of being in DC for work and for just pleasure over the
Mhm.
past several months a few times. And I was there during the government shutdown. I've seen the presence of the National Guard, the presence of ICE, walking the streets of DC. I have to tell you, Kenyon, it's very unsettling, right? It's
Yeah.
it's something that I love that city. I've been there so many times in my life, and to see it sort of almost being occupied was a very strange and unnerving experience, and something that brought me a lot of joy and comfort. We're seeing how all of the immigrant communities and all of the residents of DC were rallying around local businesses, were rallying around supporting one another who maybe had been furloughed during the shutdown and couldn't afford to eat. And I would walk into a place and they would say, "Hey, show us your government ID, the meal's on us, or the meal's discounted," and recognizing that community experience. So when we're talking about safety and we're talking about the presence of ICE, can these two things coexist in a city that already, like to your point, feels as though it has an underrepresentation at the governmental level in terms of
Yeah.
what the people want?
And Natalie, I have to tell you, your experience is the experience of so many residents across the District of Columbia and visitors to our
Yeah.
nation's capital. One of the things that really sets DC apart from other cities is its beautiful diversity. Washington, DC is the most beautifully diverse city in America. But when you have a president who wants to operate like a king, who wants to deploy the National Guard on our local streets, who wants to have ICE embedded with our local Metropolitan Police Department, it actually makes our city less safe. It erodes the trust that's absolutely necessary for local Metropolitan Police Department officers to do the community-oriented policing that they're trained to do. ICE, HSI, National Guard are not trained in the way that our local MPD officers are. And I know because of my background on the council legislating some transformational public safety policies. As a former civil rights attorney traveling the country, I investigated police departments. I changed systems of unconstitutional policing, offered technical assistance to make sure that communities understood what policing should look like. I brought a unique lens to this work, and I know firsthand that what we're seeing with the National Guard, with ICE and HSI in Washington, D.C., is not making our city safer. It is eroding the trust. And you cannot have public safety without first having public trust. And right now, the trust in our policing in DC has been shaken in large part because of these federal policies from Trump and his sycophants in Congress who wish to do his bidding. They're making us less safe and they're making people want to visit less frequently. And right now, as they've damaged our economy with their, policies that have doged thousands of DC residents, policies that are making it more expensive to live and to run a small business. Right now, more than ever, we need a safe community so that we can welcome people into our downtown to enjoy our hospitality, our tourism, our local restaurants, our nightlife, our arts, our creative economy. But we're shaking right now because of this president, and people don't feel safe.
No, I hear that. And you mentioned that you worked for the post office. So this question's just kind of on the fly, but I have to ask you because of that. I've been reading that Trump is talking about the postal service basically withholding mail-in ballots if they don't release voter rolls to the president, right? So this sort of sense of potentially blackmailing states and governments in order to comply. When we're talking about that, considering you worked for the Postal Service, can you talk about it from that perspective, but also from this cooperative nature of forcing the hand of state and regional governments to play ball with this regime? Where do you stand as it relates to ICE and with these voter rolls?
Yeah, so one of the first orders of business when I'm the next mayor is to rescind the executive order that allows the local Metropolitan Police Department to cooperate with ICE and HSI. We do not need our local police officers trying to be immigration enforcement. We don't need it. It makes us less safe. It's eroding the trust, and I'm going to get rid of it when I'm mayor. But you mentioned the Postal Service, and that job provided me an opportunity at a time where I was struggling in Washington, D.C., in my hometown. I couldn't find a job. I made a bunch of horrible decisions, like a lot of other young folks in my neighborhood who didn't see where they fit in, couldn't find our way in life. And so that job literally changed the entire trajectory of my life and allowed me to save up money, get a good paying, with a good paying job and great union benefits. And it put me on a path to go to college and to become a lawyer and to serve Washington, D.C. as a public servant. Now, I have to tell you, we're seeing the greatest attack on our democracy of our lifetimes. This president has zero regard for our Constitution or the values that make America great. And we really need a mayor in the District of Columbia who doesn't need to learn on the job, who comes prepared on day one to fight back, to protect Washington, D.C.'s local home rule, and make sure that our immigrant neighbors actually feel safe because far too many of them are living in the shadows right now in our nation's capital.
Mm.
This place should be a bastion of hope and opportunity, and we shouldn't have anyone, let alone some of our most vulnerable residents, feeling the need to live in the shadows, not leave their homes to go to work or to walk their kids to school or to worship in the District of Columbia. And right now they are. I'm running to fight for them, bring them out of the shadows and into the light.
When we're talking about vulnerable communities, and like I said, I have a background as a social worker in my previous life, and I worked with many different types of communities. When we're looking at this idea of policing, right, and how much we want to fund, or I don't like to say defund, I like to say reinvest in
Yeah.
community programs that then help reduce the need for policing. Where do you stand on those programs, and how do you handle the critiques of people saying things like you want to continue to support the funding of police departments? And would you consider bringing social workers along with police officers or in place of police officers, especially in cases where there seems to be mental health issues?
Natalie, I'm so glad you asked this question. What I think people deserve to know is that I have led on issues of criminal justice reform, of juvenile justice reform, and of policing reform in the nation's capital. When I chaired the Committee on Public Safety and Judiciary for the Council of the District of Columbia, I authored the NEAR Act. It stands for Neighborhood Engagement Achieve Results Act. It has several titles and provisions, but it created the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and ushered in a public health-based approach to crime prevention and intervention, recognizing that we're not going to arrest our way out of a violence epidemic and that we need both accountability and opportunity, right? We need the accountability to have a police department that community polices and understands what it means to show up before somebody calls 911. Officers who are invested in their neighborhoods, they know their beats, they know the senior citizen who sits on the porch every day, who's been in the neighborhood for 40 years. They know the young folks who are playing on the playground by name. They know the shop owners who work on the main streets across the District of Columbia. That's what real community policing looks like. And when a crime does happen, They show up, they make an arrest, they get the information they need to close cases and hold criminals accountable swiftly and certainly. On the other hand, you also need the opportunity. You need to show up in communities that have been plagued by high incidents of violence and usher in opportunity, meeting them where they are so that people see themselves reflected in the prosperity of a city. Young folks get connected to opportunity. They get the workforce development training that they need for the jobs that are in demand. And you mentioned social workers, mental health workers. The NEAR Act actually established the program that embedded mental health workers in the Metropolitan Police Department so that when somebody calls 911 and there's an indicia of mental health or behavioral health, the Metropolitan Police Department don't show up by themselves. They show up with individuals who are trained to help de-escalate those situations so that you don't just have a person with a badge and a gun who's not trained to really deal with it in a way that reduces the likelihood for use of force. And so I've actually led on these issues, understanding that you have to have balance in public safety looks differently depending on where you are in different communities. I understand that as somebody who knows what justice looks like as a former prosecutor who's fought crime and delivered justice for victims. And as I mentioned, as a former civil rights attorney who's transformed systems of unconstitutional policing, but I also know what injustice looks like, Natalie. I've been arrested 3 times as a teenager in Washington, D.C., when federal law enforcement descended on our nation's capital in the late 80s and late 90s, where in the name of a war on drugs. I know what mass incarceration looks like and how it destroys communities. I've seen it. And so I would make sure that as a mayor, I'm bringing the work and experience that I have, but I do this work through the prison of my upbringing in Washington, D.C., which is why I've been able to do some of the most transformational laws that create opportunity for people to participate here in Washington, D.C., and stay in our nation's capital.
I appreciate your transparency and vulnerability in talking about your own experiences as a young person. And right now, especially in DC, I've been reading a lot about the curfew and
Mhm.
should we be implementing a curfew? And there's a part of me, Kenyon, that's like, well, if they're implementing a curfew, the kids that aren't going to listen to the curfew are not going to listen if it's implemented or not. They're going to go out. They're going to end up probably interacting perhaps unnecessarily with law enforcement that, to your point, like you said, could lead them down the wrong road. Can you share your thoughts on the curfew as it pertains to how we deal with our young people as they're experiencing their own trials and tribulations trying to find their way? And can you also talk about the intersection between the idea of a curfew as well as flock technology? Because this is another issue that's been cropping up around the nation. How much surveillance, how much policing is too much? And where is this information going? And how do those interplay, if at all?
Sure. Let's start with the curfew. The curfew in the District of Columbia is a tool, and I think that the teen takeovers that we've seen and the viral videos, like what happened at Chipotle, with young folks engaging in assaults and the type of violence that really keeps people from visiting businesses and communities across the District of Columbia, especially in places like Navy Yard and Fort Stanton and the U Street corridor. And so I've said consistently that the curfew should be used as a temporary method of allowing the Metropolitan Police Department to try to head off some of the teen takeovers and other violence that we've seen play out in communities across the District of Columbia, especially when you have hundreds of young people descending on communities like Navy Yard, risking harm to themselves and others. It's up for the adults and elected officials to put in place the types of policies to try to prevent that from happening, even when young folks don't recognize the harm that they're potentially putting themselves in. And so I think it's a temporary tool, but it's not an either or. You need a curfew because we need to treat the teen takeovers like the public safety emergency that they are. On the other hand, we also need opportunity. We need to address the root causes of why teens have to feel the need to leave their own communities to go to places like Navy Yard to try to find fun and other meaningful activities. We should be showing up in their communities, understanding their challenges, and really ushering in resources, supports programs with a greater sense of urgency. As mayor, in the first 100 days of my administration, I'm establishing a youth engagement strategy, a working group comprised of the various agencies that touch our youth across the District of Columbia, including, sure, the Metropolitan Police Department and the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, and the Child and Family Services Administration. But it's also importantly going to include the Department of Parks and Recs. So we can expand the hours for our rec centers across the District of Columbia. It's going to include as well the Department of Employment Services so that every young person who wants to be connected to a summer youth employment job has the opportunity to get that connection and get meaningful employment that they can put on their resume, that they can build so that they can get a job. Because every young kid in the District of Columbia isn't going to college when they graduate from high school. We want to make sure that they have the training that they need so when they finish high school, they can be on a path to college or into the workforce. Paid apprenticeships and other opportunities are incredibly important. So we're going to have a youth engagement strategy that both partners with agencies in the government that touch youth, but also those grassroots organizations, nonprofits, faith-based organizations that are already doing the work in those communities that are plagued by violence or communities that have been lacking resources, that have been disconnected, where young folks feel the need to leave. If they're not safe in their neighborhood, that's a problem, and we need to make it safe as a government. If they don't feel like they have the programming, then that's a problem. They should have the programming. We should be matching DC's governmental resources with the communities with the greatest needs. And right now, that work isn't happening at the level that it should. And as mayor, I'm going to make sure that it happens for our young folks.
Great. And let's talk a little bit about that flock technology with
Sure.
the idea of surveillance in our communities. Does that dovetail at all here? Is that a answer to a problem, or is that a solution that a problem is created so then that can move in and become the solution, right? So I'm hearing from a lot of communities, not just in DC, but around the nation, this fear of this overextension of surveillance. Can you speak to what is going on with flock technology in the DC area, and where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I mean, it depends on where you are. And the
Mhm,
bottom line is that people have a right to be secure in their person. And I'd have to get you some more information, Natalie. I wasn't prepared to talk about flock technology.
mhm,
But I will tell you this. My background as a civil rights lawyer ensures that I'm going to protect people's civil rights and their civil liberties. For example,
mhm,
the NEAR Act includes provisions that make the Metropolitan Police Department more transparent.
mhm,
Right? They have to report the data online and make it publicly available when it comes to their stops,
mhm.
their encounters, their arrests, because we know that certain communities have felt over-policed historically. And when the Metropolitan Police Department initially did not comply with that provision of the law, I held oversight hearings. We held them accountable. When the ACLU had to sue, I supported that lawsuit to ensure that the Metropolitan Police Department was in compliance with the NEAR Act, which I authored to make sure that policing is more transparent.
I appreciate that. As we wrap up, I certainly don't want to negate the topic of affordability because it is on everyone's minds. And when we think of these positions of power within our communities, and mayor being one of them, it's easy to kind of say big things like, "Oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that." But the reality of it is, it's challenging. So, how do you address in your first 100 days affordability in a tangible way so the residents actually can say, "Oh yeah, my mayor did that."
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question because affordability is one of the top priorities for me because it is I mean, it is the top priority for residents across the District of Columbia. You have way too many people who've been displaced from the nation's capital over the years. My vision for this city is economic growth with guardrails. It is growing our tax base in a way that does not displace people. It allows longtime residents to be able to afford to stay here. Our senior citizens can stay and age in place with dignity and not feel the need to leave Washington, D.C. Our families can afford childcare as well as the ability to put groceries on the table. Because right now, people are making those choices and they're not able to do the things that they were just a few years ago. And so, the way that we're going to attack this is multifaceted. We're going to build the housing that we need in the District of Columbia across incomes so that we can have that beautiful diversity that makes DC a world-class city. We're going to build deeply affordable housing for our lower income residents, and we're going to build that missing middle so that our teachers, our first responders, firefighters, police officers, 911 operators, childcare workers can all afford to live in Washington, D.C. We're going to do it by cutting the time that it takes to get permits. Right now, it takes too long. I mean, we're talking about 9 months to 12 months to get a permit. And that's whether or not you're building a 200 unit affordable housing building or just trying to get a permit to renovate your home. It
And
is
that's the
ridiculous.
unsexy stuff.
That is. I
You
mean,
know, like
we
that's
got
the stuff that's like really necessary, but nobody wants that to hear
Yeah,
that,
we're we're
but
gonna
that's
do
true.
a comprehensive evaluation, Natalie,
Mhm.
across government of performance, of procurement, and of permitting. And
Mhm.
we're gonna cut these delays in half, eliminate the red tape, replace it with green tape, and supercharge economic activity. We're gonna supercharge how quickly people can build the housing that we need, but we're also gonna create a fast lane for people to get permits so that they can start businesses in the District of Columbia. It shouldn't take you 6 months to get a permit to start a business.
Yeah.
We're failing in that respect, and we're losing businesses to the surrounding jurisdictions. We're going to be more competitive because I'm going to focus like a laser on putting in place the technology that makes it easier to start and grow a business and create the jobs that we need to connect our residents to. That means displaced federal workers who we need to retain here in our nation's capital and not have them leave because of a lack of opportunity. But we also want to train up those young folks so that they see career pathways to the workforce in the District of Columbia as well. And so the way we grow is with guardrails, and we address childcare by building more childcare facilities. You look at the 20% office vacancy rates that we have downtown right now, and we need to cut the burdens and the hurdles that are in place that make it difficult for people to open up childcare facilities in vacant office buildings. It is ridiculous when you think about how long it takes a person to open up a childcare facility. That's whether you do it downtown or you do it at a home in a community. We're going to allow more people to get licenses to build childcare, and we're going to prioritize those really important laws like the Pay Equity Fund, which the mayor defunded in the budget that she sent to the council this year. I'm going to prioritize pay equity. I'm going to prioritize the childcare subsidy, and I'm going to prioritize the P-Keep program in Washington, D.C. Those three programs help to address the what is the most expensive childcare in the nation's capital. And so we're going to address housing affordability. We're going to address childcare. We're going to address the utility crisis where people are seeing their Pepco bills skyrocket. We're going to be honest with people as to why that's happening because it's largely driven by data center demand and facilities that have been decommissioned. We need to increase supply, increase solar, increase more battery storage, and do things in a way that reduces the affordability issues that residents across the District of Columbia are having today. And I mean across our city. People are feeling the squeeze from all sides.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to be mindful of your time. And I so appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I just have two more questions. You had mentioned utilities. Your opponents have criticized your record on utility oversight as energy costs continue to skyrocket. So, what do you say specifically to residents who open those electric bills and feel as though their city leaders haven't done enough to protect them as consumers?
Yeah, my opponent has been very dishonest with voters. In fact, the Office of Campaign Finance just fined her one of the most expensive fines in the city's history for violating campaign finance laws and coordinating with an out-of-town union-backed independent expenditure that has pumped over $1 million into disinformation about me and utilities. The record is replete with examples of how I've championed, and helped to author our Clean Energy Act. It set some of the most ambitious clean energy standards of any jurisdiction in the country when we passed that. And it set the District of Columbia on course to getting to 100% renewable energy by 2032, including 5% local solar usage. And my opponent as being dishonest because she was the only council member to vote against expanding solar just a few years ago. And so we're going to be honest with folks. And as mayor, I'm going to appoint public service commissioners who prioritize an affordability docket. We're going to automatically enroll low-income consumers and seniors in the energy affordability programs. We're also going to make sure that we're expanding renewables in the District of Columbia. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, since so much of the demand and increase in people's utility bills are due to data center demand, we're going to finally hold data centers accountable to pay their fair share.
Mm.
We're going to coordinate with regional leaders and the 14 members of the PJM regional energy supplier to hold those data centers accountable to pay their fair share.
As we wrap up, I really enjoyed hearing your sort of origin story around your early life and how you've made it to this point. And to me, it's very much exemplifies the idea of the American dream, right? Having those opportunities and using the resources that our tax dollars should and can provide to be able to take yourself to whatever stage and phase of life that you want. And so I thank you for sharing all of that. And as we're looking at the bigger picture here, Kenyon, and we're looking at people who feel disillusioned by the system, who say, my vote doesn't matter. What are things you can say to them outside of voting? And I hope everybody does vote in every election that they can. What other things do you recommend people do to get in the game and be more civically engaged so that they understand that they too, their voice and their words and their actions matter as well?
That's a great question, and I appreciate you noting my background. I tell folks one of the reasons I'm running is because I believe in the promise of the District of Columbia.
Mhm.
I also believe that every person who lives here, from our young folks to our senior citizens, really has the potential to contribute to Washington, D.C., to continue to make us that world-class city. I tell folks that this election isn't just about politics or the next 4-year term of a mayor. It's about whether working families can afford to stay here. It's about whether DC is going to be safer and more affordable, whether a young person is going to get connected to opportunity. And so I would tell folks that in addition to voting, they should show up to the extent they can at their local rec center, mentor a child, connect with a person who's looking for work, make sure that you're showing up to your ANC meetings, your advisory neighborhood commissioners, elect your advisory neighborhood commissioners. Don't neglect to engage with them because they have their ears to the ground. They are working really hard to represent their residents as well. So we want you to participate in your local democracy, understanding that it is your ability to influence not only your next mayor or your next council member, but the future of the District of Columbia. This is what this is about. This
Mhm.
is the most important, the most consequential DC mayoral election of our lifetimes. And we need somebody who's prepared on day one to fight back against Trump and Republicans in Congress to deliver a city where we protect our home rule, but also one that is safer and more affordable and a government that works for everybody.
Thank you so much, Kenyon McDuffie. I so appreciate you taking time to chat with us. Guys, if you're in the DC area and you're registered to vote, make sure you vote in tomorrow's primary on June 16th. And as always, everyone, until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Natalie. I'm number one on the ballot. I'm asking everybody to rank me number one. Take care. Great talking to you.